On travel days, there are things that I try not to think about because they're just some of them are just kind of depressing or facts that you don't want to think about. So, one of the first things I always try not to think about on a travel day, and it inevitably happens every single time, when I wake up, I try not to focus on the fact this is the last time I'm going to be laying comfortably horizontal for like 24 hours. I know that's super, like, it's just kind of a random thought, but I don't fly first class. I don't travel first class or business class. I very much travel peasant class in the back of the airplane or peasant class on the train or bus or whatever it is. So, when I get up for an international flight or even domestic travel days, depending on how far I'm flying, um, yeah, or driving, I always think about the fact that I'm not gonna be comfy, cozy, curled up in a bed for probably 24 hours. Based just because of where I'm based, if I'm traveling internationally, it usually takes me about 24 hours of travel time from the moment I wake up to the moment I'm comfortably back in bed and ready to rest. So yeah, it's just a fact that I try not to think about. So it's really, quite frankly, it's a little bit depressing to think about the discomfort that we put ourselves through to do the things we love. And that's the number one thing I think about. It's the first thing I think about when I wake up. Other things I try not to think about is the amount of time it's going to take me to get somewhere. I don't think people understand how long it takes me to get to most places just because of where I live. I'm not close to a major airport. I do have a really good regional airport, but the funny thing is, by the time I arrive early to the airport, catch a domestic flight, transit through the next airport, which would be the big major hub, it takes me just as long as it would if I got in the car and drove. So most of the time I do drive, and it just takes time. It takes so much time. For me, it's like let's pretend I'm going to Europe. Travel time about 24 hours. So from the moment I wake up, I have a couple hours at home trying to get everything finalized. I have at least a 4 hour drive without traffic to the airport. From there, because I always like to be early to the airport for international flights, I have about a 3 hour wait. The flight itself it usually lands about 10 hours to Europe, specifically like to England. And then from there, you got to figure it probably takes the better part of an hour, as insane as that sounds, the better part of an hour to deplane and get through customs and border, which is super easy. As long as I didn't check a bag, I can go straight to the train. If I check the bag, it's Heathrow. I got about another 45-minute wait. From there, it's over an hour, give or take, to the central London. And then, then I gotta, depending on the time, I either have to wait to check in, or I can check in, or a room's not ready, or maybe I have to take another train to somewhere else. And yeah, it takes me about 24 hours. So I try not to think about the time, the total travel time. It's overwhelming. And same goes on a much smaller scale for flight times. Train times I don't worry about so much. Bus times I don't worry about so much. Even drives I don't worry about so much. But being stuck in one place where there is no exit, that can make time feel like it's going very slowly. So I try not to think about the amount of time that I have to spend on a plane. I can usually get through somewhere between like an 8 to 10 hour flight. I go, that's easy peasy. It's not a problem. For me, my long flights come when I'm flying to Asia or down to Australia. Those are probably average me around 14 hours, depending on where I'm flying to. And then if I'm transiting and changing planes when I get to Asia, there's another, the last time I did, there was an additional 6 hour flight. So, all that to say, I try not to think about the flight time, and that also goes for domestic flights. If it's like an hour flight, hallelujah, up, down, done. If it's, I live in the United States, just for context, and if I know I'm flying across the country, it's about a 5 hour flight on average if you're lucky, and that's a lot of time too to be on a plane. It's like kind of not enough time to really get comfy and get good night and good nights sleep, but it's just I don't know, it's just not fun. I yeah, thinking about I try not to think about the time that I'm gonna be cooped up somewhere on travel days. It just doesn't help anything. It's not mentally good for you. We all know it's not physically good for you to be cramped in a small space for a long time with limited mobility, and but mentally you gotta kind of compartmentalize and just not think about it. It's like I'm always like, okay, the pilot announced it, moving on. But anyway, yeah, I try not to think about that. There's other stuff I try not to think about. I try not to think about my luggage when I'm traveling. uh, I find that's gotten a lot harder, with the advent of air tags. I'm not trying to bash air tags. I have 4 of them, and I do travel with all 4 of them, even if I'm doing carry-on and backpack only. I have them in multiple little hidey holes, and I do think they have their place, and I think they're a great thing. However, they stress me out. Thinking about my bag when it's gone under the bus, and there's multiple stops and people are getting on and on off a bus. I try not to think about the fact that my bag could walk away. Same thing when I'm on a plane. I try to think about the fact that someone could accidentally grab my bag. Benefit of the doubt, I'm hoping it's an accident. I try not to think about my bag getting left behind when I check it. And this is where the air tags come in. You're probably thinking, well, you can check on your phone, you have an air tag. The amount of times I have been told my checked suitcase was left halfway across the planet, I could probably buy a flight. I can't even, I don't find it amusing. It stresses me out. I've taken screenshots of it where I'm like, "Oh, hey, taxing, and here's my bag." And I guess it's potentially getting left behind. And the reality is the systems on the ground have not caught up there with being able to there's not enough pinging off of the air tag to give you a fully accurate picture of the situation. And knock on wood here, I will say every time it's happened, I've been lucky. My bag has shown up, but I try not to think about my bags on travel days. It's just super stressful, and I can't. I just can't. Even thinking about this is stressing me out. Other things I try not to think about. eh, this one's like a double-edged sword in a way. I try not to think about current events in the world. I try not to open my news and look at it. But on the flip side, I also recognize that I kind of have to as a traveler. It's very, very important to know what's going on in the world. And the reality is we live in a time in human history where things can go sideways very fast. And when you're overseas and you're away from your country, you really, really want to keep a pulse on the things that are happening, to make sure that, if you need to leave at the drop of a hat, you're ready to go. And I will say I've been fortunate enough to have never had that happen to me. However, I have had a few situations where it was like, okay, if this election goes this way, we're canceling our plans and we're leaving the country. And fortunately, again, everything has gone well, but it's something I do my best not to think about. I try to be aware of it, but I try not to think about it because at the end of the day, worrying about it is only going to hurt me twice. And I think it's more important to stay focused on the travel and what's at hand and getting to a place safely. So, those are just a quick overview, I guess, of things I try not to think about. There's things that maybe you've thought about, maybe you haven't thought about. Maybe you're like, oh my gosh, I really didn't need to think about the fact that I'm not going to be comfy in a bed for the next like 24 hours. Sorry, burst your bubble. You get a supper with me now on that one. And yeah, on that bombshell, I will stop rambling. I always love talking about travel in case you haven't figured that one out. So, as always, catch you on the next one.